Hello there, and welcome to Wildcard Decks, a channel where we take a look at some of the more off-meta options available to us. And today is going to be a bit of a longer video because we're going to go through my PQ that I went to this weekend and my experiences, my results, what I would change and reflect on after playing with this deck. And yeah, let's get into it. So, how the deck has evolved since the video I put up, was it a month or two ago, give or take? There's a greater overall attack power in the deck because I was finding it was probably a little bit too passive and not being able to get rid of their units in the early game as much. Data Vault, I was having a big debate in my head as to whether Data Vault would be worth it or not, and I came across a video that is by MoTheMonster. They talked about card groups, looking at it in that sense. So that really helped me with bumping it up to the 60 card deck that it has to be for Data Vault. And yeah, so as an example, it was talking about, well, okay, if you've got resupply in your 50 card deck, then if you add another one or two, you're pretty much negating the consistency problem that would come with Data Vault. The other probably key one was Luke. This deck really wants to get Luke at 7 resources. What's another way of getting Luke at 7 resources when you've got more cards? Is adding U-Wing reinforcement, and that will again help with the consistency of the deck. So that was actually really essential in my thinking and putting it up to the 60 card minimum requirement. So yeah, the link will be in the description. It does go through all of the rare bases, but yeah, I was only interested in the Data Vault portion for obvious reasons. So in my previous version, we were pretty much mulliganing to get the double one cost phase one play. We don't really care about that anymore. We don't really need it. In some matchups, it is very useful, so we'll get onto it in a bit. But Sabine, for example, getting two moisture farmers on phase one is quite obnoxious. So, and that can be a big help. There is one out of aspect card in this deck, which if you were eagle-eyed at the start of the video, you may have spotted it. But it was a game changer and did rescue me a number of times. But rescue versus game plan, that is part of the game plan. So yeah, really worked really well. And yeah, we'll get onto that. And I just accepted that Sabine ECL and blue-green villainy are the primary weaknesses of this deck, which, you know, as we were driving to the PQ, we're like, oh, so your worst matchups are two of the most popular decks in Sabine ECL and blue-green Kira. And that, yeah, I know, but it's fine. As it turned out, I didn't play any villainy decks whatsoever, so let's have a look at the results that I had. So the last PQ I went to, I did go 4-3, so that was going to be the minimum aim again. I was hoping to better my result, and in a way I did, because at my last PQ I won the first match and then I lost the next three, so that meant I was towards the bottom and then recovered to win the next three. Whilst this time around my results were in out basically, so I was always more towards the top, so I had better players to play against. So anyway, round one against a Mando Data Vault, which is always interesting to see. So it did have a long game plan with home ones, but because I'm in blue, I've got removal to deal with that. And also, if you get into the late game with Mandalorian, then his ability becomes mostly irrelevant, because your units are going to have too much HP to be exhausted. So I think that was the difference, but it was quite a puzzle to try and get through, and it was good fun. I think the turning point was the shielded redemption play, which we'll get onto. But basically, you can shield redemption. It comes in and you heal 8, and it's undamaged. So I think that is pretty much what won it for me. From memory, I think I did do that twice in a row. So I healed 16 in 2 phases. That's always going to be pretty difficult to contend with. Round two was against a Ray Data Vault, so mine and their deck was very similar. However, I couldn't handle how many small units they were spamming out in the late game. They were U-Wing reinforcements and then using Ray to pump them up further. It was clear after game one that we were not going to make it to a third game because I think that took about 40 minutes. So I did play the second game probably quite differently to how I would normally, because I knew I would have to win that game to be able to get at least a draw. So yeah, it was tough. Um, they enjoyed themselves as well due to some cards that I was playing. We did get a bit of a crowd as well because we actually had a deck check, so that delayed us for about 11 minutes. So everyone had already finished and we were still going. And yeah, I like to think we gave them a little bit of a good time as well. Round three was against a Han 1 green. So they weren't really able to deal with my healing. And from memory, I did have some eager escort fighters coming in shielded to take out their falcons. So that was very useful. And then if they did pilot some stuff onto it, I was able to fell the dragon, etc. I can't remember if it was this or the Kaz red, but at one point I did steal all three of their AT haulers due to the wild card in the deck. So yeah, having three space units that are well statted for free is gonna really push it over the edge. Sabine ECL in round four. So in the first game, they actually traded into my units in the early game, which is why I won that one. Unfortunately for me, they learnt their lesson and didn't do that in the next two games. The second one, it completely ran away from me because they put a Dark Saber on. I think it was a Battlefield Marine, which meant that Sabine was getting bigger with every attack from a Battlefield Marine because she gets an experience from it. So yeah, I couldn't really handle that. And then in the final game, I was doing okay, but Rebel Assault, I think it was a double Rebel Assault. I couldn't. Not many things can handle that. So yeah, that was a loss in that game, that match. And then Kazuda Red, so this was 2-0 for myself, and it was a space aggro deck. This deck is extremely well positioned against space aggro. It's probably the best thing to come up against. We've got Blue Leader that can ambush into their space. We've got Eager Escort Fighter that can ambush into their space. We've got Bright Hope that we can shield to delay them in space. If we just resource in our ground units, then we can keep the removal in hand to deal with that as well. So yeah, it was very heavily favoured for us. I think actually in one game I didn't have a turn one play, but I had Blue Leader in hand, so I was able to just ambush and kill the Anakin's Interceptor, and yeah, I was well on my way at that point. In one of the games, I'd pretty much won it at 4 resources because they piloted Kaz, I confiscated it, and then ambushed with Eager Escort Fighter, and yeah, it was a complete blowout for them, and yeah, I don't see how they were going to recover from there. Round six against Sabine ECL, so the only duplicate that I had in the day, which is always good. I was obviously concerned because I think it's one of the worst matchups to have. However, on one of the games, I did have a double moisture farmer. So even if the moisture farmer doesn't do any restoring, if they're going to kill it, well, that's 8 damage that you're saving on your base anyway. So yeah, that it is a very good play into that. In one of the games as well, they hadn't managed to put much damage onto my base in the early game, and I was able to play a redemption without even bothering to heal anything, and it completely wiped out their space arena. They had to suicide 3 units into it just to get rid of it. So yeah, in that game as well, I did have the other 2 redemptions in my hand, along with the Luke. So it was inevitable that I was going to win. It was just a matter of switching it up and going for it. Hand 1 yellow, this was a tricky one. Generally, I think this deck is very good against mid-range. This was quite difficult because of the Bodhi Rook, and they did some very well-timed Spark of Rebellions to deal with what I was going to do. So the game that I won, I was actually the aggressor, which sounds unusual with this deck, and it is. But Sundari Peacekeeper did a lot of work, Battlefield Marine, and obviously that was a game I had the initiative, so it made a big difference. But yeah, in the final game, and this is where it was all hinging as to whether I would be able to go 5-2 and better my record from last time, but couldn't quite pull it off. But in the final game, it devolved into me playing Zillow Beast. They had tech out, and then bouncing it from their resource pile with Smuggle. They also had a Han unit that was had a hot shot on it, so it had 8 power. So yes, I'm giving them -5, but they're still chipping away at my base, and I'm in the 20s on damage on base at that point. So I felt I had to change it up to be able to pull it off. So I did U-wing in the hope that I'd get a Sentinel or something. I think I did, but then Han, I can't remember. They sparked me because I had 7 resources left, so they took out the Luke because I was hoping, okay, well you kill my Sentinel and then I'll just play Luke and nuke your Han. But yeah, they sparked the Luke away, so I was pretty much cooked at that point. So yeah, they were really good. They knew what they were doing. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with how I did. As I it is a slight improvement on last time because I was more towards the top rather than a submarining, as they say in the last PQ. But also this deck is kind of a polar opposite of what I went with last time. Last time I went with Shadows Lando, and I didn't have a card that costs more than 3 resources. So in this deck, I've got 9, 8s, 7s, etc. So yeah, very much a longer game rather than aggro, and I'm very pleased with how it performed and how I did overall. There's probably only that Sabine Rebel Assault game where I felt that it was a complete blowout. So yeah. Onto the deck itself. So as a reminder, what does Lando do? So his frontside action is to pay 1 and play a unit from your hand, paying its cost. If you do and control a ground unit and a space unit, give a shield token to a unit. So if you have 1 ground unit already out, you can use Lando's action to play a space unit and then shield either of them. So it has its own conditionality, but it also has more flexibility than Luke from set 1. So it's a bit of give and take. This deck is very evenly split between space and ground, and is structured in a way where up the curve, you should be able to do it as we go along naturally. He comes out as a 7 cost, I should say, and his stats on the ground are a 5/7 Sentinel. I did not play him as a pilot at any point. There was 1 or 2 instances where I was tempted to, but on balance, if they had something like Confiscate or Bamboozle, then I'd probably lose the game. So I did not think it was worth it. If you do want to deploy him as a pilot, which I say I think competitively I would not recommend at all, but in your locals, maybe it could do some work. It becomes a leader unit, obviously, gains Sentinel, and when deployed as an upgrade, you may give a shield token to a unit in a different arena. So that can be useful. But yeah, it's quite conditional, and it gives you +5/+5, so it will be quite a beastly vehicle. And then Data Vault, I've already mentioned, you get 33 HP, and your minimum deck size is increased by 10 cards. So you have to have 60 card deck minimum. In Twin Suns, that means you have to have a 90 card deck minimum, which I have done once. But yeah, the 33 HP, I would say, is definitely worth it. You could say, well, you would have drawn your answers that you needed in your 50 card deck earlier, possibly. But also you might draw them too early, which means you resource them. So swings and roundabouts, I'm not sure we'll ever be able to fully know, but I think it worked very well. So I can't really talk about the rest of the deck without talking about the wildcard first. So this is the Out of Aspect game changer. Overwhelming Barrage, widely accepted and considered to be one of the best cards in the game, so why not pay just an extra 2 resources for it? So we all know what it does. I've only gone for 2 of them because I think 3 would be a bit excessive, but the 7 resource turn is probably the most important in the whole game because that's where we can really start to turn it round. So your ideal hand at that point is going to be 1 Overwhelming Barrage and 1 Luke, because then you've got 2 different routes, 2 different options, depending on what happens, to start clearing their units out, if you haven't already. So if Lando comes down and dies straight away, then you've got Luke to just nuke whatever you want. If Lando survives an attack, then they've either lost one of their units or it's heavily damaged, in which case you can do an Overwhelming Barrage and spread 7 damage on their side of the board, which is going to kill 2 things, hopefully, at a minimum. So yeah, there were a number of eyebrows raised, I think, or skepticism when I was talking about it in some Discords. And it was always a fun reaction when I played it at the PQ. I think some people's eyebrows flew off their heads. No one expects the out of aspect overwhelming barrage. It worked exceptionally well. It was absolutely not a mistake to include it. Really, really pleased with it. And it was quite funny. I did overwhelming barrage with Zilla Beast at one point. I still lost that game. That was the Ray one. Because they had village protectors, so I couldn't get to their juicy units or base anyway, because they still have the shields on. And I also overwhelming barrage with a moisture farmer. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do when there's an Enfys Nest with a hotshot blaster and only 2 health left. Onto the ground units. So as I mentioned already, we've got 3 moisture farmers, and the other one cost on the ground is RTD2. So because we've got a larger deck, this can help us filter what our next draw is going to be so that we get to things that we actually want. So that also helps to cancel out the larger deck size. And then Moisture Farmer is just quite essential. It saves you a minimum of 4 damage because if they're in, well, they're going to have to kill you at some point. So yeah, they'll often go for the Moisture Farmer first because otherwise you're going to get potentially more than 4 damage saved on your base. Battlefield Marine, so this is a new addition that came in from the last version of the deck that I profiled. The attack power of 3 just means that it can pretty much kill most turn 1 plays on the ground, and we want to get to the late game, so it did make sense to include it. Sundari Peacekeeper, so I was bouncing between this and Yoda, because Yoda has the card draw, but Sundari Peacekeeper has Raid 2, so again, a bit like the Battlefield Marine, it can take out a fair number of units. The other thing to think about as well is there's a lot of 5 health units on the ground. If you go with Yoda, he can't kill them in 2 attacks. Sundari Peacekeeper can. So that was another reasoning for it. The 1 power is relevant when it's defending, but the Restore 2 is good as well. Perimeter ATRT, this is another addition. There's going to be a few additions, obviously, because we had to put an extra 10 cards into the deck in the first place. But we didn't have a Sentinel on the ground last time, which surprised me. I bounced between this and Nima Outpost Constables. They're both 4 costs. Nima is a 2/6, so it was the large health pool that appealed to me initially. However, thinking about it again, I was like, well, the things that kill Nima Outpost in 1 hit or 2, 3 powered hits is the same for the ATRT, but I'll get an extra damage on them. So this made more sense. I was a bit worried about takedown, but I don't think that ever came up. So yeah, but there is that potential. Nima Outpost can't be killed by takedown straight away. This can. But yeah, shield it for 5 resources, and that'll delay them on the ground in general. And then the 3 power is relevant if we get to a point where they have a 3 health unit left, and we can Luke them to finish it off. So yeah, a really good addition. General Riken. So this replaced Cargo Juggernaut, basically. Cargo Juggernaut is very nice to have the immediate impact of 4 healing. However, when I thought about it a bit more, I was like, okay, well, if they're on the ground, then I can Sentinel General Riken as he comes in as a 5/7, and that is probably going to prevent more damage to my base than just healing 4. So, and again, at 6 resources, he comes in, they perhaps run a few units into it, they won't have much HP left, which then means we can set up an overwhelming barrage or a Luke for a significant wipe. The other bonus that can be funny when it happens, but it's absolutely not something to build the deck around, is his on-attack ability. So choose friendly unit if it has Sentinel, give an experience token to it. So you deploy Lando on the next phase, and if General Riken is still around, then he attacks, and you can actually just pump Lando up, which, as I say, is just quite funny when it happens. But yeah, just a nice side bonus, really, rather than anything we're looking to particularly pull off. Luke, so in my last video, I did say in the missing pieces that Luke would really elevate the deck, and yeah, he is utterly crucial to how this deck functions. So I'm sure you'll know, 6/7, restore 3. When played, give an enemy unit -3. If an enemy unit, a friendly unit I should say, was defeated this phase, give that enemy units -6/6 for the phase instead. So if Lando, because Lando has to be dealt with, because he's got 5 attack power for one thing, but he's a Sentinel just blocking them. So Lando has to be dealt with. He dies. You play Luke and kill pretty much anything of theirs. So it's a very good option combined with Overwhelming Barrage. I did actually Overwhelming Barrage with Luke at one point as well, which is always good fun. And then Zillow Beast, the absolute top end for the ground. So 9 cost, 10/10. When played, give each enemy ground unit -5 for this phase. So, and then the second ability isn't massively relevant because you're highly likely not to kill this thing with damage, regardless. So, to be honest, the -5 was actually relevant in one game. It did stall it out enough so that I could, I think, get another redemption down to heal. And yeah, I won it from there. But yeah, it's the biggest thing we have available in these colours on the ground. So just a one-of. It's not essential to the deck, but when we've got 60 cards to work with, you can definitely fit one in. On to the space. So, one late change that I made was adding in an extra restored arc. I originally had the Starhawk in, but I basically thought, well, if I'm playing Starhawk and that's the best choice I have at that point, I've probably already won the game anyway. It's just going to mean I win faster. So yeah, it felt like having a more likely chance to have a restore one early game unit would be more beneficial than the Starhawk. So Phoenix Squadron A-Wing is a new addition. I think I had the Grey Squadron Y-Wing, so it was the 2 health that I wasn't a fan of, but to be honest, that was never really relevant in the matches I had. So very good choice. If you have the initiative, play it. You can kill most turn 1 space plays, which is what we're very happy to do. And then we come on to the two well, not quite most important early game units in space for us, Blue Leader and Eager Escort Fighter. So they are both ambushers. If you have 4 resources and a ground unit, you can shield these up. They are probably going to kill whatever they are attacking and ambushing into, and they will survive undamaged. This is particularly tasty for the Eager Escort Fighter, because if they're playing Millennium Falcons from Spark, then this can come in and take it out and potentially survive if you have shielded it. Blue Leader, of course, has the added versatility of paying 2 to then move it to the ground and potentially ambush there. This is quite good, or can be quite good against Sabine, because you can ambush it on 5 resources, assuming they've not managed to upgrade her, and take her out. But yeah, these two are pretty much the primary reasons why space aggro doesn't really work against this deck. Red Squadron X-Wing, so it's just to get some card draw going. Deal 2 damage to this unit if you do draw a card. Pretty much always going to pick to do that. Bright Hope, so the temptation I think would normally to be go with a full 3 of these. However, because of Blue Leader and Eager Escort Fighter, I don't think it's really needed. 2 is absolutely fine. It's also immune to the likes of Takedown until it's damaged, so there is that too. The when played can sometimes be relevant. If you've got like a Moisture Farmer or R2D2 on the ground, then for 4 resources, I mean at 5 you can shield it. I think that's where my brain was having a bit of a moment. You can return Lon Leader ground unit to its owner's hand, and if you do, draw a card. So that can be relevant as well with Red Squadron X-Wing. So if you've got Moisture Farmer or R2D2, I would often just return its hand, because again, if you want to shield something the next turn, you've got a cheap enabler. So yeah. Home 1. So this was a late edition, relatively late. It didn't perform too well for me. I didn't feel like I was in a very good spot in any of the games where I would want to play it, and that's probably because of how I've constructed the rest of the deck. So I think if you've gone with the likes of Village Protectors and Concord Dawn Interceptors, then yes, this would absolutely have a very good place in here. But because I haven't, the best real thing that I would do is pull out a Blue Leader and ambush from there, which I did do once. But yeah, this didn't really have a place, so I think we'll get on to the changes I would make. Obviously, it's an extremely good unit, but yeah, it didn't really fit. So yeah, you live and learn. And then Redemption, the probably most important card in the whole deck, because at 9 resources, and Lando is usually dead by the time we get to 9 resources. Do Lando ability, pay 8, 9 resources total. When played, heal up to 8 total damage from any number of units and/or bases. Deal that much damage to this unit. The shield tanks all the damage. Heal your base for 8. Have a 6/9 sentinel in space that is completely healthy. Absolute game changing. Absolute game changing. If you draw it really early on, you may choose to resource it in the hope that you do draw another one later on, which normally you do. So yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous for Lando. It's by far the best unit and play you can make in the whole deck. And yeah, I think there was actually one spot where I was able to heal Lando for 1 or 2, which meant that he would then survive an attack without them having to pump their unit up. And it also meant they would have to run their whole space arena into the redemption because it didn't have enough damage on it. So yeah, that was quite a blowout for them as well. I think that might have been one of the Han 1 green games. On to our events. So Spark of Hope is an addition. Again, this was part of the thinking when I watched the video I mentioned earlier. If I've got 3 resupplies, then Spark of Hope is the next best option, and because we are generally running our early game units into the opponent, then your units are going to die, so it's not going to be too tricky to trigger. Resupply I prefer because of the consistency, you know what you're going to get, and it doesn't require any setup. But yeah, this filled in a nice spot and was quite useful. Fell the Dragon, so for 3 of those because we're looking to get to the late game, and you do get 5 powered units pretty much from 5 resources onwards, so it's actually relatively early that you can use this, and it is crucial against Sabine because you can get rid of Poe and Wrecker. Takedowns, 2 of those, because I think we've got a decent number of options in the early game via units to be able to control the early game. If you're playing against aggro, then we have a 3rd one in the sideboard, which will always go in. Vanquish, so just non-conditional, apart from the fact it can't be leaders, just to help fill out any awkward spots where maybe Fell the Dragon or Takedown doesn't fit the bill. And then 1 Rival's Force for any tricky leaders. I was able to take out a Han that might have been in the Han yellow game that I won. They deployed him and our rivals hauled him straight away. Yeah, I think that was pretty crucial. Then U-Wing reinforcement. So again, this harkens back to the video I mentioned earlier. We really want to get Luke down. 60 cards means it's less likely you're going to see Luke at the right point. Well, if we U-Wing, then we search for top 10 cards of your deck. So think about it, that's the extra 10 cards that we've added. So it should cancel it out, really. And then you can play Luke from there, if that's what you need, or just any other combination of units that are 7 or less. And then, of course, I've already gone over Overwhelming Barrage. That's the other event that is not on this page. So in the sideboard, I had put in Confiscate, primarily if I went up against pilot leaders like Vader, but also just for its universality. I don't think that's a word, but universal application and consistency. 1 resource, you're pretty much always going to be able to play it. It's easy to plan around. Defeat and upgrade, very simple, very useful. Tech, I do not have good experience with tech whatsoever. It's really annoying. Perhaps I'm clearly just playing things wrong. I don't know. It's a bow I need to add to my arsenal. But I had 2 of him because generally the games go on longer. So I'm like, well, if I need something from my resource pile, then I can use tech. However, every time I use tech, he just dies straight away. I don't know what it is. I just can't make it work. So yeah, we'll get on to changes, and yeah, he would be ditched. Takedown, as I mentioned, the final one in here. Chewie, so he's mainly here for if I went up against blue-green villainy, so that I can have a unit that can't be that easily killed. Yes, it's no glory, but at least they have to use it on that. So, and the 5 attack power means I can start pushing in damage. But yeah, the blue-green villainy, I think I'd kind of accept it. I would probably just lose to those. Choose side, similarly, that was for blue-green villainy. So if they play a Devastator, I'm like, cool, have my R2D2 and I'll take that. And that could be enough to win at times. So that was the primary reason that was in here, just 2 of. The Nebula Ignition, this is the worst Super Laser Blast to an extent. defeat each unit isn't upgraded, so potentially I might have 1 or 2 shielded units, so this could do a significant wipe on their side whilst keeping my units around. So just one of those, but this could be an option to replace Home 1 as well with how the deck functions. So the changes that I made, as I say, I would remove Home 1, which does sound absolutely mad, and the candidates are Reinforcement Walker, it's another 8 cost, but you get guaranteed immediate potential life-saving value because you can heal for 3 straight away, and then it's also just continually healing free potentially as well. And then Nebula Ignition, because how the deck is built, that might be a better choice than Home 1 in its entirety, or the CR90 Relief Frigate. So we do have a massive gap in space between 4 and 8 resources, because we've got Bright Hope and then it's Redemption. So we can control the early game in space pretty easily and handily, which might mean they just kind of sack off space altogether. So yeah, but the Relief Frigate does give us a bit of restore in the interim. As I say, I would remove Tech. I'm sure he should be in there, but I just can never make him work. So no, goodbye. And then maybe Regional Governor. I'm thinking mainly for, I don't know, those problem cards like Overwhelming Barrage or Rivals Fall. Actually, I don't really care about Rivals Fall. I don't know. My brain's a bit cooked from yesterday, I think. But yeah, as a possibility, I guess Darksaber, or mainly for aggro, probably. So yeah, that is the deck and the experience that I had. So I'm very pleased with how the deck has turned out and how I was able to play it, because generally I go for shorter game decks. This is by far the longest matches I've had, and the most number of resources I've ended up with. I think I went up to 14 at one point, and that was after not resourcing for a while. So yeah, I had good fun, and whether I'll run it again for my next PQ, probably not. And I've also given all the secrets away now, so you know I can't be doing it again. But yeah, I'm really pleased with how it was. One of my favorite decks that I've made. But yeah, let me know what you think. And yeah, Lando, he's very good and very good fun. See you in the next one, and take care.